it's never about the technology. It's always about value. It's about the pain points and opportunities, and what is it that you're really applying it to, right? With that said, is a foundation critical? Absolutely critical. Is a theoretical foundation essential? Totally. But at the end of the day, what matters to enterprises and in businesses is how do we realize those outcomes? And most people don't really care what technology you use underneath to make it happen, including today's point about AI. We talk a lot about it.
Welcome to the Trailblazers podcast presented by BST Global, where we feature the visionaries who are shaping the future of the AEC industry. My name is Javier Baldor, Chief Executive Officer at BST Global and your host for today's podcast. I am joined today by Shankar Kalyana, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Stantec. Shankar, welcome. It's been a year. It's been a year since you kindly joined us on this very podcast and spoke at our inaugural BST Global AI Summit. And thank you again for joining us and coming back once again, both to this podcast, Trailblazers podcast, and also our AI Summit. How have you been?
Being wonderful, Javier. And first of all, this is the one event I actually look forward to, because both the graciousness of you and your team and the amazing event you guys put together and the conversations and the networking, that's always energetic. And we are also talking about something that's very timely, for our industry. So I'm just delighted to be here, and what a beautiful location on top of that. So thank you.
You're too kind. You're too kind. And thank you for those kind words. Maybe for our audience, if you could introduce us to Stantec, as well as a little bit of your background and journey to Stantec.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Delighted to. So Stantec, we are one of the largest architectural engineering and design firms globally. And we've had a long heritage, like 75 plus years in the industry, in several countries. We focus more on the architectural planning, engineering, design side of the business. We have all the technical disciplines, that usually gets into the industry, and we are in multiple sectors, water, infrastructure, transportation, community development, energy resources, etc. And the growth has been, phenomenal, right, in the industry in general, and clearly in Stantec. And that's kind of what led me to, my moment with Stantec, so as you mentioned, I was with IBM. I've been in the digital and technology space, pretty much my entire career, close to 40 years. The previous 23 of them being in IBM. And I was an IBM Fellow leading, digital transformation, cloud-enabled transformation, AI data infusion, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just a fascinating, this industry is such a great threshold, and we'll talk more about it. And that opportunity of, what's possible in this industry in a new domain, applying, something this industry is not necessarily attuned to as a heritage, that is just fascinating for me. And that's what led me to this role. And we'll talk more about it, but it's been a delight, in the last, 18 months that I've been at Stantec. So
I've done my homework, and you briefly passed by IBM Fellow. And I did some research. IBM has appointed a total of 338 IBM Fellows since 1964.
Yeah.
This program recognizes outstanding technical contributions and leadership within the company. I did not know this, but there's been 5 Nobel Prize winners,
exactly,
and 5 Turing Award winners that are IBM Fellows. So that's an astounding accomplishment for you personally. Stantec, because you both are extremely humble. I know Gord Johnson, extremely humble man, as are you. Stantec is, in my opinion, one of the most prestigious and respected engineering consultancies in the world, known for its design excellence and acumen and operational business performance. I did some further research. Since its inception on the Toronto Stock Exchange, Stantec has returned 20,996% since 1994. Unbelievable
Unbelievable. I
operational
know.
performance. So kudos to. I know there's a lot of colleagues over the years that
Absolutely.
have really contributed to that, but
Yeah.
stunning performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in most cases, it always goes back to people, right? I mean, the expertise that our people have, and the reputation that we as a company have developed over the years in projects of, critical importance to nations and the society at large. That's what carries you at the end of the day, right? So yeah, we are very proud of it. We're also humble, as you said,
Yes.
because we know we can do more, right? And we depend on the ecosystem to make a lot of these things happen. So we're very humble, we're very proud, and it's a very bright future for this industry. So yeah.
100%. So you've had an amazing career journey from your roots that originate in the south of India. Can you share with us really the lessons that you learned on this journey that have helped shape the person that you are today?
No, absolutely. I think on a professional level, and I'll go back to maybe one or two personal things, but at a professional level, one thing that I found, I've been through technology inflection points in the software industry in general. The way we know it is maybe about 6 to 7 decades in its maturity. It is, engineering as a profession in Stantec, that's like 3,000 years old. I mean, we still build wastewater systems the way, some of the techniques are still the same, right? Software industry and digital is about a 6 7 decade thing, so very very young. But with that said, I've gone through the major inflection points in all of them. So, and the one thing that I've learned, both by experience and someone actually, it's like you learn by making mistakes, right? It's never about the technology. It's always about value. It's about the pain points and opportunities, and what is it that you're really applying it to, right? With that said, is a foundation critical? Absolutely critical. Is a theoretical foundation essential? Totally. But at the end of the day, what matters to enterprises and in businesses is how do we realize those outcomes? And most people don't really care what technology you use underneath to make it happen, including today's point about AI. We talk a lot about it. But is that the means? Is that a means to the end, or is it the end in itself, right? And to me, the end in itself always matters, which is about outcomes and opportunities that we solve. So that to me is the lesson that I've taken out, and to me and it takes a ecosystem to do that. As I mentioned, it's never about you. I mean, because you require both internal and external networks of competence and being very aware of that as you go through this journey, right? So those are two things that have stuck with me, through the 40 years that I've been in this business, and that's the only way. I mean, in fact, the one thing I'm absolutely confident on. And 10 years later, we'll be talking about some other technology, but we'll still be talking about what can it do to solve societal problems and enterprise problems, right? So. Yeah.
Well, against that backdrop, what inspires you? What moves you on a daily basis?
Oh my goodness, that is like a great therapeutic question sometimes. No, I what excites me are two things. In fact, my wife and I talk about this all the time, and she can see that, right? There are days she'll see me, the energy level changes, right? It's like that, and usually I've traced it back to two things. One is problem solving. And usually when we say problem solving, that's in front of people, with people, with clients, and then internal, businesses and so on. So that the fact that there's always a problem to solve, there's always an outcome usually for it. Very rarely can you not solve a problem, right? It's like that. So there's always, it's a painful process, but you got to go through that. So that process of problem solving and actually creating an outcome that actually delights somebody, that is the case.
That's where it's at, huh?
That's where it is. So
we're going to dive into the technology in a bit, because we obviously have the backdrop of the AI summit. But really, speak to me about your vision for this industry. What are the possibilities? Technology may be a component of that, but at the highest level, what is possible for the engineering consultancy of the future, our industry that is so important, particularly to solving some of the world's most challenging issues, whether it's climate change or water or poverty, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think So first of all, I had to preface that by saying I'm a novice in this industry. I'm a digital expert, but I'm not an AEC expert, right? I mean, so there are people who are amazing at this space. So what I say is a reflection of what I experienced through them. But with that said, if I look at it through the lens of the natural environment and the built environment, in the built environment, the pattern that we typically see is we go through a several month to a several year build cycle, but a several decade operational cycle, right? Um, and the value is really on the latter. More values in the latter. Yes, there's money to be made on the former because that's where consultancies are and that's where a lot of the effort is. But from a client and industry standpoint, how much you can compress that front end is all time to value to the back end, right? And then how less effort you spend on the back end and operations is really where that is. So I think when we look at it through a lens of, what does this really mean to asset management in the future? We had this notion about lights out data centers, in IT for about 30 years ago. Not to say that it's a complete reality, but we made extraordinary advances in that. So when you now take that analogy and apply it to the operational aspects of the built environment, now you can start imagining lights out operations and self regulated asset management functions and predictive maintenance in a different wealth of reality, etc. Because it's also intersects with the aging workforces because they have built up this. I've been with clients who have backlogs that run into thousands, and no human can keep up with that, right? So those are the opportunities. On one hand, it's about, I do believe our industry is going through a complete manifestation where the design cycle is going to get compressed and the operational cycle is going to get way more automated. And that means we have to design that automation right in the design cycle. So we're going to see a different way of how we think about the traditional world of, how do you go through architecting and planning and designing and all that, right? So that's kind of what I think. But, time will tell if I'm actually even like 10% right about that.
Well, I think you're onto something. I mean, that's a fascinating concept and approach. And how transformational do you think that could be in terms of you having spoken with you in the past on this podcast? You're very passionate about value creation. What kind of transformational impact can you compress the design and really have a very novel and efficient way to predict maintenance and amongst other things on the tail of as far as operations and maintenance? What can that mean to your clients, to the world at large?
I think the client perspective, when I look at utilities and operators and the personas in that space, they just want to get to that space as quickly as possible. So they are not. So to them, design is cost, right? So they want to. So they are going to look for enterprises and consultancies that are getting to that point as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and as automated as we just talked about. But if you look at the design cycle of it, they are looking at that as well. You know what? How do I ensure that now I'm still in business? How do I rethink my design business? Because I still have to design. Just because I operate something, I still have to go through the design and build. It's questions about how quickly you can do that, how efficiently do that. So I think it's going to require a reimagination of the future of the design consultancy, right? Today we are thinking about and acting on things, whether it's parametric design, whether it's design automation, whether it's how project management, can really go through a lot of different coordination points, whether how do you quickly respond to RFIs and RFPs. We are approaching them in facets, but we're still using the same construct. I think, what we have to also think about is the left field, entrance into the space that are not traditional AEC players who are getting this AEC expertise from other companies, but are completely rethinking the whole life cycle, right? That's what I think we have to be careful for. But it's both an opportunity and a challenge, for the AEC industry, right? So,
yeah. Well, I was going to get to that a bit later, but let's tag on to that right now. Disruption often comes from the outside. We're seeing management consultancies. We're seeing tech companies.
Yeah.
Accenture, for example, making 10 to 12 investments into our space. Um, how will that play out? I know it's early innings for that, but you see the playbook where these tech companies, heavy balance sheets, well-funded, deep AI and data expertise, merging with engineering domain experts to meet the infrastructure challenges before us. It seems like a clearer path.
Yeah.
How does this industry respond, embrace, win?
Yeah.
What does that look like, perhaps in the future? Because these are companies that are coming in a material way. Putting aside private equity, there are approximately 200 platform companies right now. I personally believe that's the next wave. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So you're spot on. By the way, the word that you use is melding. I would even take it a bit further to say, I think it's fusion. We had to fuse. I mean, digital has to become, part of the fabric of the built environment and the natural environment. How do we go through that? So to date, I think our industry has viewed that as an appendage, honestly, right? It's a tool to be used, right? We had to think of that as more than a tool, as a teammate. It is now, the digital assistant is now part of my workflow, right? And as I'm reimagining the workflow, how does that actually change the way I go through the thought process, concepting to planning to design to engineering, build, etc. Right? So I think it's a mindset shift that we have to make in our industry, and until we make that, I think to the extent that there are enterprises treating these as appendages, and it's an also ran, we'll get to it because we don't have a crisis, we don't have a need yet, etc. I think those are the ones that are in potential danger of getting disintermediated, right? To use that. But with that said, the external threats that we are talking about in the industry, at the end of the day, this wall is still there, right? I mean, someone still has to build it. The domain and engineering expertise and the physics and the STEM side of it, you can't replicate that. I mean, laws of physics and laws of chemistry are still the same, right? So that domain expertise is not easy either, right? So these companies may have the digital, presence, but they don't have the heft of the engineering expertise that is really required. So that's why I go back to the fusion word. I think the ones that are able to fuse that and reimagine the techniques, whichever way, whether they're left field or right field or traditional players, they are the ones that have a better chance of succeeding in the space and sustaining that, right? So that's how I view it. I think, it could also result in some consolidation, whether triggered by private equity, whether triggered by some of these challenges. I do believe we are going to see some consolidations because we are a highly fragmented industry too, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see some consolidations for sure happen in this space, right? So,
well, you have a tremendous perspective and a lineage in digital transformation.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? What are the challenges? What's in the playbook, particularly with AI, big data? How do you enable that digital transformation at scale? And what are the ingredients to do that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's like a whole podcast in itself and more. But I think digital transformation is a moniker that we are using to really think of this as what is digital, first of all? Digital is really the spectrum of technologies, software oriented for the most part, sometimes touching into the hardware side of it. I mean, is robotics digital? Yes, it is, both on the hardware side and software side, but really the software side is a traditional way to think about it, whether it's operational technology, whether it's engineering technology, whether it's information technology, right? That blend is what digital is. Then the question becomes, so how does it get infused? And to my earlier point, traditionally we have looked at that as a set of tools and technologies that just help you, right? How do you go from 2D to 3D to 4D? How do you actually do design automation? How do you do parametric design? They're all, tools to be used is how we have actually thought about it. But digital transformation is really thinking about two aspects. How do you create new value in the external sphere through new services, new products, new solutions that we are offering to your clients, through the models we talked about? How do you help our clients actually transform their own operations that range from advisory all the way through support, right, as a life cycle? It's about how do you now apply that internally to reimagine the workflows we just talked about, whether that's client-facing workflows or whether that's internal workflows, HR or whatnot. So it's about the transformation. But none of this is successful without what I call the fabric and the foundation. And the foundation is a technology foundation. It's an architectural foundation. It's a skills and talent and operating model foundation and expertise. So it's that foundation is so essential because what usually limits most organizations, it's not the fact that they would all chime in and say, what you just said, Shankar, is actually right. Yeah, we should do that. But to your point, where do we start? And we find that we have a lot of these foundational things just, missing, whether it's the data fabric, data fragmentation, data consolidation, governance, whether we talk about talent, how do you take somebody who's just coded in Java and suddenly get them into an AI space that is literally the way it is? I mean, how do you suddenly convert that? So there's a lot of this, little nuggets that come into play. But all of this boils down to now the approach. Where do you start? Well, you start with pain points, going all the way back to the beginning. It's not about applying technology. It's about what pain points and opportunities are really there that the business believes is essential for our survival and for our growth. And then you attack them in this way, and you prioritize them using the same frameworks, etc. So I think it's the transformation is all these different facets: technology dimension, organizational dimension, cultural dimension, process dimension, all these coming into play, but applied in a very methodical way to realize and go address those pain points and opportunities, and digital powering that, right? So,
AI, talk to me about the importance of data and having your foundation well established and thought through from a governance perspective, from an architecture perspective, to be able to realize the prize. Your thoughts?
Oh, wow. It's like garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's, that's kind of the candid and blunt way to say it. But fundamentally, none of this matters without underlying foundational fabric, as we mentioned. And the fabric for transformation usually is data. Because without when we say, it's not about whether data is there or not, it's more about, are we able to leverage that data? And that usually means, so for example, one of the use cases most people talk about is, hey, how can, AI and digital help me in accelerating the sales cycle, okay? The RFIs and RFPs that come into play in the AEC industry, they are ginormous, right? And they're not like 10-page RFPs. These are like 2,000 pages with specifications and drawings and codes and everything. And that takes a lot of labor and expertise to be able to go through that. But when you think about it from the standpoint of actual people working on it, very rarely do these people actually have visibility to a similar proposal that might have been done in another geography, or somebody that might have created a similar solution elsewhere, etc. Because it's not that others have not done it, it's just that we don't have access to that, and we don't have visibility to it. So when we talk about data, it's not about the fact that data doesn't exist. It's how do you create a semblance of visibility to this vast space, and usually you don't approach it just bottoms up. It's a bottoms up view to say, how do you really put your common fabric around it? But how do you now leverage the data through the use cases we talked about? So rather than go at it in one fell swoop, you are using those pain points and opportunity to drive and say, for this one, here's the kind of data that I need. Let me now create the right architectural framework. Let me create the right strategy. Let me create the right governance models around it. And then go kind of incrementally build the foundation as you go through. But that's how you approach it. But yeah, data is kind of the fundamental engine and oil behind it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and is there an opportunity to create high-value data products, that aggregate, anonymize client data naturally, and then package it and monetize it and solve real problems for your customers? That's the shift in the monetization of this data business to support project-based consultancies. Your thoughts on that in the future?
Yeah, I think the answer is a clear yes. But it's got a lot of the buts associated with that, right? To the very point you just made, Javier. So let's talk about some possibilities, right? Just dealing in the public space, we just talked about proposals. Well, guess what? In the public sphere, a lot of the proposals are out there in the public sphere. They're open, right? Because by rule, you're supposed to have visibility to, a lot of the data. But doesn't mean every data is clearly visible there too. To the extent you already have visible data in the public sphere, how do you now take that and create correlations amongst them and offer that as a service to somebody we just talked about in the proposal side to say, you know what, Mr. Engineer, you don't have to go spend 3 weeks digging into that. I already got the code information ready for you. And this is how it is applied in that scenario, right? As an example. So I think that's one possibility. The other possibilities are, again, when you come to things like, rules and regulations on whether one of the things we do in the AEC industry is we think of AEC as a very specific thing in the domain, but in general, about 50% of the processes are common across the industry and across multiple industries. So I think there are opportunities in that space, whether it's HR, whether it's employee, IT, et cetera, that there are also opportunities. So that's where I think the opportunities are. But the challenges are exactly some of the things you mentioned. We have to respect privacy. We have to respect confidentiality. We have to respect, the perils of, introducing bias into that equation and making sure that we are able to have transparent explanations of the product, et cetera. So there's a lot of the other responsibilities that come with it that we have to be very, very, careful about, right? So,
what are you most optimistic about the future, excited about the future in this once-in-a-generation opportunity that is before us, the successor to the internet, AI?
Yeah. Humanity. I think I'm a pragmatic realist, but I'm also an optimist in the sense that for me, I always used to share an anecdote with some of my mentees a long time ago about there are certain processes you never need to worry about because you don't need technology to solve them. So this thing that says, I need a technical solution to everything is not the way to think about it, right? So yes, AI is an extraordinary inflection point. I mean, there's no question, from the printing press to the internet to AI, right? I mean, that's how we are going to describe AI, generations to come, right? But with that said, I think, we shouldn't forget that at the end of the day, it's, humans leveraging that. And humans have to be part of the equation. So what I'm actually optimistic about is that, I'm not a doomsday believer in this. But with that said, there will be pockets of doomsday scenarios because there will always be the netizens, quote unquote, who are not using it responsibly, who are, whether it's enterprises approaching it purely for productivity reasons and laying off people, or people using it for, abusive things. Those scenarios will exist. But I'm overall optimistic that we are absolutely going to transform. And the next generation technology comes into play, we are going to be having similar conversations about value, and humanity will guide it, right? I believe in the macro power of humanity, right? So
we'll close with this. Looking 10 years back from now, what would you say? I expected this, but I did not expect that with this. This evolution, this transformation. What is that?
I honestly, with AI, and I could even say this with cloud at one point too, but definitely in the last 10 years with AI, I and several of my peers, honestly, I don't think we expected how quickly it has come about. In general, we talk about technology as these things, it takes. The time compression happens like Moore's law in reverse, right? It's like that. But I don't believe, I think generative AI and in the art of the possible around it has just shaped people's perceptions. And, could Shankar Kalyana in 2015 have talked about this moment the way it is? No way. Zero chance I would have been able to do that. I knew ML, DL, and AI in general, we were just going to incrementally improve impact of it over a period of time. But the exponential increase that we've had in its impact and potential, I should say, more than impact, in the last 3 years, I would not have predicted that. Okay, and I'm honestly sitting here today, I don't know what that next 10 years is in terms of what is that next 10 years later, and I can't say that. I wish I could, but quantum is there. Clearly computing, the infrastructure will change. But I do believe some of these we think of them as incremental. I think they're going to come way more rapidly, than what we anticipate. So,
well, it's an honor to have you on our podcast. You're a true gentleman with such class and humility and a visionary that reimagines things, and that's rare. So,
Javier, my turn to say you are extraordinarily kind to me, and it's always a pleasure. That's why it's a pleasure to have these conversations with you and your team. So, thank you for hosting me again, and look forward to a great event with you and the rest of the crew.
thank you, Shankar. And thank you to our audience for joining us today on the Trailblazers podcast. Until next time, take care.